All right, all right. Hello, everybody. This is Darren. It is Matthew on Mondays. It is a Monday for sure, but the lectionary has tossed us up again a text from John. So we will be looking at John 4, chapter 4, John chapter 4 today. The meeting of Jesus and the Samaritan woman, or the woman from Samaria. And so that's what we will be looking at today. I'm not going to take the time right now to read through the text because the lectionary text is um, almost the whole of John 4. So that would be a lot. So we're not going to do that just now. I was waiting to see if this was going to pop up here, but haven't quite seen it yet. So waiting for it to go live. Hope it will soon on Facebook. I see some people out there following, but I don't know where from. So anyway, hoping that it gets out there soon. Oh, here we go. All right. Yes, we are up. Okay, good. All right. If you are watching along out there somewhere, you can leave us a comment in the comment section, either YouTube or Facebook. We'd love to chat with you if you're watching about the text that will be many people's reading for this coming Sunday, the third Sunday in Lent, John 4. So feel free to leave a comment. If you're watching later, leave us a comment still, and we'll come back to a question or two if we have a chance to do that. I do hope that I think Mark might still join us, and maybe Leonard. We'll see. I know Marcy is busy this evening, but that's all right. Okay, here we go. John 4, Jesus and the Samaritan woman, or woman from Samaria. Now, just as we talked about last week, we have these scenes in John, and some of them are long stories that take place, especially these interactions between Jesus and another person or another couple people. Last week we looked at Jesus and Nicodemus from John 3. And one of the things we said about that is that it seems like what John, the author of the gospel, is doing is using Nicodemus as a representative character of perhaps those people in the community that fit the description from John 2, at the end of John 2, of those who seem to believe that something is happening, that God is at work in what Jesus is doing, but they're not ready to fully commit to the community and let's call it the community or the commonwealth that Jesus is inaugurating right there in their presence. So this would be a representation of people in John's time or in John's community that appreciate maybe what the Christians are doing, or appreciate the divine presence among them, but are not willing to fully embrace the life that comes with that. So that is a kind of a representational picture of what Nicodemus and Jesus, that story could be about more than just those two individual characters. And as we'll see, that's a possibility again for this text as well. So as we look at that, let's see, it looks like Mark is here. So let's bring, there he is. Hey, Mark. you frozen or am I frozen? There we go. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Just now I did. Yep.
Can you hear
Yeah, you're kind of cutting in and out, but I can hear you.
me?
Yeah, it says your internet's a little bit slow. Yeah. Hmm. You're kind of freezing and then coming through and freezing up again. Yeah.
I might exit and try.
Okay. Yeah. Try that. Message in the chat here, waiting for Mark to see if he can come back in and have a little stronger signal when he comes in. All right. Yeah. All right. It looks strong now. All right.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it.
Technology, you gotta love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You been all right?
Doing all right.
Good.
This is a really interesting text for this coming Sunday you got here.
Yeah, I know. Another one, right? Another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm kind of tired myself, I tell you what. It's been a long day.
All right,
But
Darren, you don't have to tell me.
yeah.
This because I worked and I'm here. But I don't
Right.
mind doing this because I enjoy the discussion, but I know how you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of interesting. A lot of interesting things with this text.
Yeah. So
Let me
I
hear your thoughts first.
Well, I was just saying when you were coming in, I was just beginning by saying that, last week we looked at the possibility that the story of Jesus and Nicodemus is kind of representational of two different segments of the community. You know how Nicodemus is not just an individual, but represents, a broader group of people, and just to kind of transition into saying that there's something similar potentially going on here in this text as well.
Yes.
As they were saying,
Yes, and I think Grant she points that out. In the book she points out that
right,
there could be represented some issues between the early church community and the perceived mission towards to reach out to the Samaritans.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and even to the point that maybe there were some women Samaritans who were were had leadership positions, or had something maybe in the church. So I do think that particular, if you take that particular take on the text, then it does start to remove some of the issues, that are present in the text to some degree.
Okay. In what ways do you think it helps remove some of the issues?
Well, I think first of all, if you think of the Samaritan woman as a representative of the people of Samaria asking legitimate theological questions from a Samaritan point of view, and then you also take into account the colonial reading of the five husbands, to say that what it would have been alluding to for the Samaritans would be the fact that they, kind of allowed the Assyrian to come in and had five different kind of
Yeah.
tribes
Yeah. Which talks
related
about,
to
yeah.
them. So, and then, the idea that their current husband, their current trying to be in relationship again with Yahweh was not quite a legitimate covenant, because they were, they weren't quite doing it right. They weren't quite
Yeah.
doing it right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that eliminates a lot of the salacious kind of reading of who this woman is, and what, and why is she coming in the middle of the day, and is this, is she some, I think it making it not about an individual woman takes away some of that.
But about a community.
Right.
Yeah. The only issue with that is that, how can I put this? Those from, I guess, the Jewish church still have this attitude that we better than them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
that still comes across, and
Right.
I think what I was saying, laying out my questions, is this whole, if you guess apply redaction criticism,
Right.
and look at that process, that might be coming
Right.
out if you look at from a redaction criticism perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I would say, about that too is that, we always fall into the danger of placing ourselves in the place of Jesus in the story, right? So if the Jewish church thinks of themselves in this story as Jesus, I think
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah,
If they think of themselves, or they understood that the role that they're playing in the story is the disciples, then that might be a little bit, they might take it a little bit more humbly,
yeah,
because they don't get what's going on. The
yeah,
woman is the one who fulfills the mission whenever they can't,
yeah,
um so yeah, I mean, I think you're right that and of course we fall into this even today, that we want to see ourselves in the Jesus position,
hmm,
as taking the side, being the Jesus in the story, when we're probably better off trying to find ourselves in the
yeah,
in one of the other characters, and trying to
right,
listen to what
yeah,
Jesus is saying,
yeah.
in the midst of that.
And
But
yeah,
I think you're
you're
right.
right you're right in a way that if we take the side that this is a community asking some serious, it raises some serious issues, and then this dialogue going on there,
Right.
um, and hopefully that those on the Jewish side or on the early church side welcome the dialogue.
Right.
Then yeah, that's the key,
Right.
is how do they react to these
Hmm.
legitimate questions? Are they open hearted about it? Say, hey, maybe we don't agree, but this is we can talk about this. Or
Right.
if they still have this, no, we we better than you, better than
Right.
thou approach. It depends on
Yeah.
how they receive it.
Well, and of course, it's interesting as far as some of the theological questions around where to worship.
Yeah,
Um, you know, uh, Obviously, neither one of those, I mean, basically, what Jesus is saying is that, in the time that is now, neither one of those places
right.
is the places to worship, is the place to worship. So in a way, you know, neither of you can claim to know,
Yeah,
to know what, where the right thing is.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but I do think, to push the kind of the what you're saying as well. I mean, I do think there's some very challenging readings that come out of that post-colonial or colonial kind of perspective that you sent in the article,
yeah, yeah,
that you sent,
yeah,
and the other Gench book gets into that as well.
yeah, yeah,
That reading.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
if anyone out there wants to, really read against the text and really challenge the text, that the post-colonial reading is probably the one you want to
you want to look
you
at,
want to
yeah,
look at and see Jesus as the missionary
yeah,
going into the
yeah.
yeah.
And
So yeah,
I'm wondering about the whole redaction processes. I mean, because I mean, the statements that Jesus made, that do we know who we worship and you don't. I mean, that's almost so kind of arrogant.
right.
And I'm not saying that Jesus is being arrogant. I'm saying that the redactors
Right.
are
Right.
being arrogant.
Yeah.
And that they had to they had to have Jesus saying that because of maybe the positions or the feelings they had.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting because, it's difficult because we always, the other side of it is, like we can all see like the very negative ways that kind of thing can be used.
Yeah.
But then there's also the fact of how do we challenge an untruth? How do we challenge a something that just isn't, this isn't the way,
Yeah.
I mean, if you imagine the Samaritans as the, white evangelical fundamentalists, and we need to have a conversation about what is true worship,
Do
to
you want
some
to
degree.
reverse that? That you said the Samaritans as the white
Yeah,
evangelicals?
yeah.
Really?
I'm saying, how do we,
Okay.
I mean, I'm saying if that was the case, how would we challenge their untruth? How would we challenge the fact that what they think is their good and right worship, isn't good and right worship,
Wow. I guess I'm a little struggling with
right?
I'm struggling with the fact that with the Samaritans, the evangelicals, I thought you would say that the church, the first century church was being the evangelicals, but I guess you could look at it that way too. I
Well,
guess.
I'm not talking about how there's equivalencies across
Yeah.
time. I'm just talking
Okay.
about the fact that while on one side it is true that you don't want to go around discounting people's claims to truth,
Right.
and worship. But there are also times when people are worshiping the wrong thing in the wrong way. And you
Okay.
need to say to them, look, like we agree on these things, and there'll be a time whenever some of these things won't matter, but this particular thing that you're doing is not the right thing. Like this is not a good way to worship. This is not a good
Okay.
way,
When you say it's not the right thing, it's because it's harming other folk. Is that what you're looking at, or
right.
okay? It's being it's harmful.
Right. Well,
Okay.
it's harming other people.
Okay.
It's leading them into a false, place
Okay.
themselves, and a false understanding and
Yeah.
relationship with God, I, I'm just, and I'm not saying that the writer of the text is necessarily correct in that assessment of who the Samaritans were and what they believed,
Yeah.
but there is a sense that at times we have to say, look, this is
This is not right.
we actually don't have the whole truth, but we know that this particular thing is at least more true than
Yeah.
that thing over there that
Yeah.
you're doing,
Yeah. I guess what it boils down to is how can we set the table so we can have an honest dialogue?
right.
Yeah. How do we do that? And that's the reason. I guess that's what we see in this text
Yeah.
that folks were attempting to have an honest dialogue. Whether
Right.
it happened or not is another story. But maybe they were at least making the attempt. I don't know. That's I mean, I guess when we look at the whole ecumenical movement, I guess we've been trying that to a certain
Right.
extent.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to find I was trying to find a there is a quote about that statement about you worship what you don't know,
Yeah.
you know, and we worship what we know. And I
No.
thought they did a good job of suggesting what might be Um, oh, yeah, I'll have to try to see that, try to find that where that was again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we I think John in general, the Gospel of John, we've seen over the years how there's some really troubling ways to read this text,
Yeah.
and there's very trivializing ways to
To
read
read
this
it.
text,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
And I
sure.
think that gets back to one of the questions I raised is that um, how do how do we find mechanisms to get people to engage troubling text
Mm-hmm.
in a critical manner? I guess it goes back to is the perspective that the Bible is not God, God is God, and
Right.
the Word of God is not the words of God. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so again, just like the text that they had to do the exegesis on. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
so I mean, how do we get people to engage these texts in an honest, open, and critical way?
Right, right. Well, and what I think is fascinating about this text in particular is, that it's almost a lesson in and of itself about how to read Scripture. You
Yeah,
know, because if you take it as on face value, Jesus goes to Samaria and sees this woman, and this conversation happens, and then you start reading into it what you think about this woman and what what's being said,
yeah.
what's being said about this woman. You come to a whole different place.
Hold on a second, Dan. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries.
Be right back.
Yeah. All right, everyone. While Mark is looking, I'm going to see if I can find this this quote um, here, which might be harder than I think. All right, if you're out there and you're watching along, if you've got a question about what we're talking about the Samaritan woman in John 4 and the conversation with Jesus. And I'm looking for a quote right now.
Sorry, Darren had a little
No.
electrical emergency.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah, that's not good at all.
Straight.
Yeah, I still couldn't find that, but that's all right. I think the other thing I think that the one of the authors that Gensch in her book mentions is this this author. I don't know if you
It's upside down.
Sandra. Is it sideways or whatever?
For me, it's upside down.
Okay, let me see if I can. Oh, does that help? All right.
Written that you may believe. Who is that?
So Sandra Schneider. She's the one I think that she really references about the about seeing.
Yeah. She does. Yeah, I remember.
Right. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that she says about John, the Gospel of John, which I think is kind of helpful and maybe goes to what you're saying about engaging the text, is that she says that you should think of any revelation that happens in John as a self-revelation, meaning that the revelation is intended to show something about the person who's revealing themselves in a way that invites you to be in relationship with them. Just like if you're in a marriage, when you reveal something about yourself, you're doing it so that you can be vulnerable and deepen the relationship, and and have a reciprocal thing going on. And so I think that part of what she's trying to say, and I think it's a good way to look at the text, is that there's it's a self-revelation that's inviting someone to kind of
and trying to enhance community. I think, and that's good, because I think when we read John, I think we get and caught up in it that John is this text that's very mystical. I'm not saying there's no elements
Right.
to John about that, but the fact that one of the things that John is trying to do is to build community in a very, very positive way,
Right.
through this idea of self-revelation, and I think we just get caught up in the mystical part.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll emphasize that.
Or yeah, either that or like an over spiritualizing
Yeah.
of what's happening, and I think again taking it to the very individualistic and personal um side of things as well in the midst of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of that last week with the God so loved, the John 3:16.
Yeah.
The more we think of that as just an individual thing, the more we miss what's really going on
What's
in
really going
the
on? Right.
story.
Right.
First, we
Right.
forget that it's about in the Nicodemus story context, and then if it is true that Nicodemus is a symbol of other things, then you're talking about whole communities and whole groups of people.
Yeah. And then we could get back to talk about read, not just as this text, all text, but I think somehow we can get across to people that I think we are so in our culture so individual centered, and we know that God calls us as an individual first, but the text, the Hebraic understanding is that we're called into community, and I think we miss that part, how important community is for the biblical worldview. I think
Mhm.
we miss that a
Right.
lot.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah. Well, and especially if I think this text in particular, it's pretty persuasive, the idea of seeing this as, you know, something about Samaritans and Jewish people, especially I think that whole idea of and I don't remember whether Gensch talked about this. I think she did, that the story happening at the well with a man and a woman harkens
And
back
she goes
to
to talk
all,
about the history of that. Yeah,
right,
she
all
talks
of
about that in the
these
beginning. Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
history of that. That
Jesus
that builds on that
being the
history.
bridegroom coming to
Yeah,
uh coming to embrace the Samaritans. And
yeah,
I think the text itself seems to really push in that way.
yeah.
And so yeah, I think maybe just even starting by, when you're talking about engaging, and maybe this is another thing about engaging with text and asking serious questions is, you know, if you engage it about the transformation of your community, or the openness of your community, or the, who's in your community and who's not in
Yeah.
your community, instead of about, what do I believe about this particular thing, or how much, you know, how, I don't know, how does this make me feel about my relationship with God? I mean, if you approach it in that more community oriented way, I think it does ask you to ask more difficult
It
questions. And,
does. It does. It does. I guess it's getting folks into the process through our ministries of education to think about the text in a different manner than what most folks are accustomed to.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
challenge. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think this story and the one, and the one before, again, even within the text, the way that the conversation happens also suggests something to us about how we, you know, if not read scripture, but encounter the, the word within scripture.
Yeah.
It it's not straightforward. It's challenging. It's offering, a statement here that has multiple meanings.
Yeah.
It's saying something, that might, you might not hear the first time through. And
And
it's
and
asking
Darren, as you say that, I think sometimes, and you can help me with this a little bit. We sometimes we have this tendency to say that when we read the Bible, scripture, oh, it's easy.
Mhm.
It just ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you what this thing is saying. And I'm not saying that that's not important,
Right.
but maybe we need to. I'm not saying we need to get rid of that, but we need to push folks in maybe a little bit different way.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
that,
you know, well, I mean, I, actually, it's funny. I ran into a guy that I know from, he's a part of kind of the, the local kind of like peace and justice movement, here,
okay,
not really not a, I don't think from a Christian back or, right now, probably, I don't think currently in a Christian church, but, more from
mm,
probably a spiritual, but not religious kind of scenario or whatever. And,
yeah,
he was saying something he was asking me, um, he was asking me about like what happens when you go to seminary, and you start encountering these texts again,
yeah,
in that setting. And I was just saying, yeah, I mean, that idea of just, simply picking up a text and reading it, kind of, you realize that there's a lot of layers going
yeah,
on, and a lot more ambiguity,
yeah,
especially when you get into original languages. I mean, we saw
yeah,
that in the John 3 text,
yeah.
with multiple words that have multiple meanings,
Meanings, yeah,
and that change, that do change the meaning of, of things. And I'm always amazed. We did the Gospel of Mark, before,
yeah,
and went through it. And, even there, a lot of people say, just have them pick up the New Testament and read Mark, and it's a simple, easy story. And they'll, I mean, I think there is a way that the, you do encounter something when you read these texts. I think you do, I mean,
yeah,
I think that you can read them and you can encounter something,
yes, yes,
um, on your own. Uh,
yeah,
I think that that's true. I think it's possible that that happens. But
yes,
as far as like embodying them and living them, I think that they always ask you to do that in community. They always
yeah,
ask you to do that with others. And they always ask you to challenge the borders of your community, to challenge the,
yeah,
the, yeah, how insulated you are within your community.
yeah. Which
And
gets back to the problem we have with doing that is our own cultural biases here in America, which just gets us in. You want to get into this whole over sexualization of the Samaritan woman,
right,
and that to me that just gets into our own cultural biases and hangups. To me,
right, right. Yeah,
our own patriarchy. I mean, we know that the text has a strong patriarchal background, but our own patriarchy and our own misogyny.
right,
Whereas, Jesus didn't really ask the question about what her sexual background was.
right,
He just made the statement, but we get into that.
right, right,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
We
Well,
want you
and
to sing to a whole conversion to a from a harlot to a pure woman.
right,
Yeah,
right, right. Yeah. And it's miraculous that the town listens to this woman who,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It makes, kind of, yeah. And of course, that's something again where in some way, seminary or study like that is a different kind of community that asks you to take the text seriously in a different way,
yeah,
so if you're in a class with a woman professor reading this, this story, you know that may be the place where you have to go to be challenged about the fact that it never says anywhere in this text anything about this woman being,
yeah.
you know any kind of harlot or any kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
it just doesn't say it,
This doesn't say that. You're right,
um
right. I was
so
looking for it, I couldn't find it. I was trying to find when I was searching online
right,
some type of
right,
womanist womanist view of the text. I couldn't
right,
find one because
yeah,
I think that would have been a very interesting perspective to bring.
yeah.
Yeah,
I know, yeah, I don't know of that either. I know, the guy who has the, who is the pastor of the black church that meets in the gym at my former church. I think he
Where's
did his
in Richmond?
yeah in Mechanicsville. Yeah,
Who's that?
it's I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was trying to phrase my comment in such a way that I would not have to try to remember. Larry, Pastor Larry, Pastor Larry.
You say he meets in the gym in
Yeah, he
Mechanicsville?
meets in the gym at Fairfield. Yeah,
I'm in Fairfield. Wow.
yeah. So and but I was just saying that he did his PhD. He did his PhD at Union Presbyterian, and it was on this John 4 text as a missionary or evangelistic text.
Okay.
Understanding the at least this was one of his texts.
Yeah.
Sorry if you watch Pastor Larry. I'm sorry. I blanked on your last name. Yeah. But anyway, but I don't know. But like you say, I don't know of any womanist reading of that either. But
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I was trying to think of the other. Well, I also thought again. It reminds me in a way of the story of in the sense of the progress of the scene, the story of the Canaanite woman or the Syrophoenician woman.
Mm-hmm.
Where because they talk about this being in a sequence of stories from that go from Cana at the wedding scene to Cana at the with the healing of the
Mm-hmm.
official's son, I think it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
And so part of it is at the wedding, the disciples come to believe because of the sign that he does. He has this
Mm-hmm.
conversation with this woman. Well, no, Nicodemus comes as a representative of the Jewish leadership, but doesn't quite embrace fully what's going on. This woman brings her whole town, to Jesus, and Jesus stays with them. And then by the end, someone from even further outside in this official's son is healed, by Jesus, and that kind of
Yeah.
movement from inside the Jewish circle to broadening it to Samaria, and then broadening it to this, to this official. That's another interesting kind of movement in this text as well.
Yeah. And that healing of that person, the physical healing, but there's the healing of these two communities,
Right.
That's taking place. That
Right.
Maybe some of these barriers that have dogged both sides for years are starting to break or be shattered by their understanding of
Right.
God's movement through the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting too. As we look at the debate about, well, who's superior or who of where to worship. Well, we're both under the Romans.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we both we have a. I don't want to use the word a common enemy. But we have a common oppressor.
Right.
That we need to deal with. Yeah.
Right.
So
Exactly.
we need each other.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess that's a hermeneutical message for today. That as we sometimes bicker over doctrine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That I'm Baptist, you're a Presbyterian, and we bicker over how to baptize. I guess when the message of this text is, what does it really matter? There's more important issues in terms of marginalization of folk, in terms of system marginalized folk that we can work on together rather than fight over how you baptize and how I baptize.
Right. Yeah.
Or how you do your worship as compared to how I do my worship.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that yeah, and I'm not sure. Again where this is coming from either, but I think it also, John is also moving in this kind of way of saying that a lot of the stuff that you used to care, a lot of the stuff that you used to care about, a lot of stuff that you thought was like, very, very solid and very firm and um, something you couldn't go against or something you couldn't, let go of. That
Yeah.
now with the presence of the Word
Word.
made flesh,
Yeah. Yeah.
something different is happening. The time has come. The hour
Yeah.
is now. You know, there's a new agenda. we need to
Yeah.
get we need to get our act together. We need to get on the same page
We're
here.
on the same
And
page here.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is again a challenge challenge toward when you talk about the ecumenical movement,
Mhm.
towards maybe like making statements on such issues as climate change.
Right.
Climate change.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of worrying about how we interpret doctrine, we got this real existential threat that we need to come together on and
Yeah.
and make some strong theological pronouncements on.
Right.
So,
Well, and
yeah,
once again, that's we we've been taught over and over again to read these stories um against any kind of collective action, against any
mhm,
kind of any kind of coming together, just about coming to some belief, you know, and that being the ultimate end of the story, you
yeah.
know. And yeah, obviously that's not, that's again stuck in personal piety, personal
Personal
decision
piety.
making,
I mean, I think a good example of that. A friend of mine, Facebook friend of mine, she's down in Texas. She wrote this book from I think scripting and scraping on the subject is on the challenges that people have in Texas in terms of food resources, and I think
mm-hmm.
she's looking at Lent as we think about Lent as a time to give up stuff. Well, you got some food challenge folks that don't know where their next meal is coming from.
Right,
Let's think about Lent. Let's think about Lent from that perspective.
right,
You know,
right,
how do we? You're talking about giving up sweets or candy or alcohol, whatever. What about those folks who face those challenges every day? Whether I'm going to eat, whether I'm going to pay my rent, and whether I'm going to get food today, and how do we alleviate these structural issues that are causing that? I mean, I think that's pretty. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's yeah. I mean, again, if you think about these things in terms of your own, I mean, obviously, we all have to do our own spiritual work and our own
Right.
discipline,
Exactly.
in our own selves.
Yeah.
But if it's not connected to how we're, not connected to community, not connected to how we live out in the world collectively,
Yeah.
it can get just completely selfish and self-referential,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
I guess as we think about how we worship, how we do stuff, that somehow we have to find a way to keep that before folks all the time through our worship, through our study,
right,
through the various ministries having a church that it's not just about you and I, but it's about how do we, use what God has given us to create change, to
right,
make lives better for folks. We have to
right.
somehow keep that before people, and just break that whole old habit of how they look at things, and
Yeah,
try to get them to challenge that anyway.
right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about it enough to think about how to completely integrate this, but um, one of the things I saw um, that today was the anniversary of the Dred Scott decision. You know,
Wow. Today.
uh,
Okay. Wow. Okay.
so that idea of who's a citizen, who's not a citizen, who's a part of what's going on, and who's not a part of what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Um, you might be able to make you could maybe make a analogy to to that reality maybe
Yeah.
using this text this week
Yeah.
in light of that. But yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. I didn't realize that today was the day. Wow.
yeah.
That's good. That's good stuff.
That was on my calendar back there.
Okay. Wow.
Right.
Uh,
So
wow.
yeah, I turned over the new. I finally turned it to March.
I do that a lot too. I go, oh, okay, I need to flip this to yeah,
Right.
yep, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
oh my gosh, yeah.
yeah. So what's you know the next better than I do. What's for next week?
So next week is I think next week is John 9, which is the story of the man born blind,
Mm,
and Jesus heals him. And then then the Jewish leaders call him in front of them, and
land back.
basically, how dare you get healed?
Yeah,
Well,
land back them. Okay,
who
okay.
healed you? And then and I think in part of that conversation too is the disciples asking, you know, who sinned
Yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah,
that
yeah,
he was,
yeah. Okay,
uh, yeah. So I think that's what's next. So
okay.
that should be interesting.
Yes, that should
But
be.
yeah, this is going to be it's all the hardest thing about preaching on text like this is just how long it takes to read the text. I mean, it's a long story. So,
Yeah, it is.
you
Yeah,
know, um, by the time you get done reading all of it, there's
well,
not much time left to say much about
let's
it.
say much about it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you got to hold folks' attention. Yep, you're
Yeah.
right. Yep, yep.
I mean, one way I think I've tried to do that before is to, read part of it, comment on it, and go
All
back
right,
and forth,
back and forth. Yeah. So give
through it.
them bits
Yeah.
and pieces to chew on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
yeah, so I don't know. We'll see how it comes about,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I happen to have a very last week I just had a very real world um kind of something that's going on in the church that related to the text. So
Really?
that
Wow.
made that a little easier. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And actually I've been trying to work on that situation all, all day today in one way or another. So, but anyway, you know
Yeah,
how it is. It's never a dull moment. Never a dull moment.
yeah. I'm not. I mean, I know you. I think you would do a good job. Did you ever think about maybe having a woman preach this text?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it would. I think I saw somewhere. It'd be really interesting to do like a team.
Team thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
that would be. You know what? That would be very interesting.
yeah, yeah.
I've seen people. I've seen people do that once or twice. I've seen I can't remember the name now. They're out of New York. They did it one time.
Mhm.
And then I remember when I was in seminary, a married couple did that. That did that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 That's a great idea.
Yeah. I think probably that Syrophoenician woman text would be a really good one
Wow.
to do. That would be the
Yeah,
one to go. Yeah.
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 That would be very interesting.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have all the options to find different people to
Yeah.
to preach the text. But
Yeah.
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 No, it'll be, that's an interesting, that's another interesting challenge. How do you, how do you bring the broader community into the, when you need the different perspectives, when you need the
Yeah.
different, yeah,
Yeah.
that's always a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. It
yeah,
is.
that'll be,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think, well, and the hard thing is too is that there's so much to kind of peel away if people are familiar with the text and have a certain reading. If they've heard this reading,
They've
this
heard it before. It's very familiar. Yeah.
right, and that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they've probably heard the salacious harlot
Yeah.
side of
Yeah.
thing over and over again.
Yeah. But
Um,
that's where that just the drama of if you had two people doing it, a man and woman, I think
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
drama might draw folks in to say, hey, maybe I need to think about this in a little bit different way.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
What would be what would be interesting is if even if you didn't do the sermon this way, but if you had the reading of the text, um, you know, by like groups of people,
Yeah.
instead of just to get that sense of it being a wider representation than just
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah. That would be good too.
yeah,
Yeah. But I
it's
mean
interesting,
that's the kind of thinking we need to get
right,
to draw folks out of
right,
the boxes that they're in terms of how they think about stuff, to challenge them to think things a little bit differently. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, usually you have to be you have to plan enough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
You have to
Yeah. That's right.
you have to have taken the time to
Yeah.
to consider all these things, usually like a
Yeah.
week or two in advance, and
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
or
Takes
maybe even
time.
more to get the people
Get
to
the people
yeah.
to be comfortable. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I thought about it last week when I starting to read the text and started to study it. I thought about, if nothing else, just getting a couple of different people to read,
Read.
so
And
you're
maybe
doing
even a different version this different translate more modern translations
right.
that even doing that too
Yeah.
might help a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Yeah. All
Well,
right,
I'm going
Mark.
to tune in next week and see how you do this thing.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah. Well, yeah, I think we have, yeah, I think it's going to be a good, I think we have our little band we've been putting together playing next week. So
Okay.
I'm excited about that too. So,
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that should be good.
Yeah. It should be. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe Marcia will be back with us next week too.
Yeah. So yeah. No, she had
Yeah.
something to do this week, so maybe we can get her back
Yeah.
this week.
Yeah.
All right, Darren. Well, good stuff, man. We'll talk. We'll
All right.
talk next week.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right. God bless. Take care.